Our struggle for equality has always demanded risk, and if necessary, sacrifice.
I respect your struggle. I really do. But don't advertise tactical opportunism as pious morality, because that's when you lose me.
It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio, and man, that was an epic season of the Orville. New Horizons, Season 3 of the Orville. On Hulu this season, unfortunately not on network television, which I would have preferred, but, you know, hey, Hulu dumped a bunch of money on Seth MacFarlane. He got to make episodes the way he wanted, with the content and stories that he wanted. Really stepping it up. The visuals are even better than they were before. They're still very clean. They're not, over dark and CGI heavy, although there is a lot of CGI and green screens. But this was a fantastic season, and I was going to do an episode by episode review, but Talking the Orville, aka Egotastic Funtime, has been doing that, and I didn't want to cut in on his party, and also, I've been kind of busy this summer, getting ready to start what I hope will be my final academic year at university for my master's program. So, things are going. But yeah, let's start breaking down some of the episodes here, because there's a lot to like here, some not to like. It's not really so much a complaint as really being specifically against the Orville. It's really generally all productions now, especially on streaming platforms. And that complaint, which I'll get to in more detail later, is that, the number of episodes, I think, is really limited, because you don't get all that much time to really get to know characters. And I'll revisit this later as I go through. So let's go ahead and do an episode by episode breakdown, just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. Now, the first episode, Electric Sheep, the Orville is, finishing up a refit following the battle against the Kalon. Most of the crew, including Marcus Finn, Gordon Malloy, and newly assigned Ensign Charlie Burke, they're having a hard time with Isaac's presence on board. There's a significant conflict with the crew. Marcus says he wishes that Isaac would die. Isaac is confronted by Charlie Burke, who lost a dear friend during the Kalon battle when she was serving aboard another ship. The friend, Amanda, has sacrificed herself to save Charlie, having her launch out a life support pod or shuttle just before the ship blows up, and she stays behind. So Isaac is really kind of confronted with the fact that a lot of the crew are angry with him, and justifiably so, for his betrayal, for, even though he turns against his own people, but it's still, yeah. So Isaac effectively commits suicide via a targeted EMP burst. Claire and Ty are kind of devastated. Marcus, at first, he is like, yeah, whatever, but, he breaks down to Charlie and expresses his regret. He didn't really mean to tell Isaac that he wished he was dead. He was angry, he was upset, but, he didn't really mean it. He still cares for Isaac and sees him as a father figure. So Lamar finds a way to restore Isaac, but Charlie has some special skills. She can think four-dimensionally, and she's kind of reluctant to help out. She doesn't want to. Isaac, after all, was part of the Kalon who killed her best friend, and Captain Mercer really is not able to really get through to her. It's not really until Marcus kind of pleads with her to help, confessing that, he didn't really mean to say that Isaac would die. the, that's when she kind of starts to break down. I mean, she doesn't really want to do it, but she kind of has to. So, Isaac is revived, and Claire, she says, look, if you ever have suicidal thoughts again, or decide that, you're having a tough time, come to me, So this was a pretty good episode. It was rather touching, dealt with suicide. It really kind of cut through some of the bullshit that you see in a lot of episodes pertaining to the subject, but it was still rather touching. So yeah, that's episode 1, I really kind of felt for Charlie Burke. I mean, she clearly loved her friend, and we don't find out just how much until later on in the season, but it's a rather touching episode. Now the next one is kind of it's kind of a hallmark episode. It's kind of like a throwback to an episode of The Next Generation where Geordie LaForge is taken over gradually by a life form that years prior had kind of laid some kind of parasite or some kind of infection in him that gradually began to turn him into this organism, and that's how they reproduce. So Shadow Realms, which is episode 2 of the season, the crew's undergoing diplomatic relations with the Krill, trying to access previously unknown regions of space, that are within Krill territory. Vice Admiral Paul Christie comes aboard to kind of negotiate with the Krill in terms of securing passage. It turns out he's actually Claire's ex-husband, a former mentor and chief diplomat who was assigned to this mission. So the Krill say, look, don't go into this region of space. It's bad news. Demons take over your people's bodies and force them to commit all sorts of depravities. Well, of course, the Orville thinks it's really... Sorry, just kind of wiping some cobwebs here. They're rather superstitious, and the crew decides, well, it's worth the risk, and they proceed anyway. They come across something in what's called the Kalar Expanse that is home to this enormous space station. Paul is infected by these spores that cause him to mutate into this weird spider-like creature and infect several other members of the crew by altering their DNA and turning them into spider monsters. So it's it's a nice little monster in the house story. Claire and the crew manage to force the mutated crew members to leave by threatening to release a synthetic virus that will kill them. But the creature that used to be Paul, says they'll go, but not forever. So I think we'll see them again in future episodes. Assuming we get a 4th season, I hope we do. But Claire and Isaac really kind of begin rebuilding their relationship after this. I thought it was a really touching episode, in parts really scary. Ty and Marcus, find themselves on the run and under threat. It's really a good episode. What I don't like, however, and I'm going to be a little bit nitpicky here, I don't like that the Orville keeps trying to redo episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get that the Orville is Seth MacFarlane's love letter to Star Trek, but I really feel that at this point the Orville really should be doing its own thing and not trying to do previous episodes of Star Trek, but better. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does quite well in doing episodes of Star Trek better, but I think, after 3 seasons, it really needs to kind of be its own show. It's still a lot better than the garbage being shat out by CBS currently that is really just a bad reboot of a bad reboot of Star Trek, but I don't think it really needs to be a remake of Star Trek, if you take my meaning. So then we go into mortality paradox. Talia returns from shore leave. There's a signal that leads the crew to a planet called Naran 1, which was previously thought to be desolate and uninhabitable. But they find it actually quite populated with contemporary technology. Ed, Kelly, Talia, and Bortus and Gordon go to the surface to investigate, and they find themselves caught in this series of dangerous situations where they each have a brush with death, and there's this a scenario where the Orville's nearly destroyed by a Kalan vessel, but the real Tala kind of throws a monkey wrench into this when she contacts a ship while Lamar's searching for the landing party, and it turns out the landing party is basically being beset by all these illusions that are revealed to be the work of a group of immortal beings, one of whom disguised herself as Tala. It's a member of the species from Kelly's world, as I call it, where they come into our dimension every 11 days, or no, every 30 days, and in that time 700 years pass while they're in this other dimension. So in the year or more that the Orville has been undergoing refit and doing missions, these people went about through their life cycles and they've evolved into immortals. But the problem with immortality is that they lost touch with their humanity, basically, and so they're kind of reduced to trying to regain that humanity by living vicariously through humanity, because their society has begun to stagnate, and they figure, hey, look, we need to maintain our connection to our former mortality in order to, kind of give us the incentive to keep evolving. So it's it's one of those episodes where I think the reactions could have been a little bit more negative, because if I were an immortal being, I wouldn't try to hold on to my humanity by living vicariously through humanity and putting other people through hell to do it. I would hang on to my humanity by living among mortals, maintaining empathy by, daily interactions. I mean, that's just me if I were in that position. But, it's a nice episode that has a pretty interesting concept, I think. So, that's my opinion. I just think the ending could have landed a little better, in my opinion. But, hey, it's not my story, and it was still good and entertained me. So episode 4, Gently Falling Rain. The crew's invited to escort a Union delegation to the Krill homeworld to sign a historic treaty between the two peoples, but Talea, whom we first met in season 1, I think, and then season 2, we last saw her where she was impersonating an Orville crew member, and she and Ed ended up trapped on this planet where it was a survival situation, and it turns out once she gets back home, she goes into politics, and she's running for Supreme Chancellor. She's gotten a huge following, but it's very isolationist rhetoric. The delegation goes ahead, though. The incumbent chancellor, thinks he's going to win, but shortly after everyone gets there, Talia stages a coup and seizes power. Has a former... Actually, no, she takes a knife and kills the chancellor. Also plans to kill the Union delegates, but, makes arrangements for Ed to be released. Kind of like, okay, this is payback for you letting me go. So a group of Krill who still support the alliance between the Union and their people intercept Ed, and they introduce him to a little girl, half human, half Krill girl called Anaya, who turns out he's she's his and Talea's daughter. So yeah, at some point when Talea and Ed were in their relationship, while she was undercover, she got pregnant and gave birth to Anea. So Talea doesn't want to reveal her child's presence for fear of losing her following and her newfound power. Ed, refuses to go. He ends up back with the delegation to face execution. But Lamar and Clara arrive disguised as Krill. They stage a rescue. So the peace treaty between the Krill and the Union is pretty much over, but Ed is determined to find a way to preserve the peace and protect his daughter, even though, he knows he might not ever see her again. So it's really kind of a bittersweet ending. But, Talea's, watching Anaya playing over a security feed. So obviously she cares about her daughter. She doesn't have her killed or anything. She's not that heartless. But, she's going to be back. Now, episode 5 is one of 2 episodes that give me the reason for calling the title of this video in the thumbnail, A Tale Year of the Topa, because Topa gets some pretty strong development here in this season, and I think it just kind of dominated the overall story arc, because it's just so touching and actually a very powerful message, as it relates to how we as a society treat both intersex people and transgender people. There's an allegory, I think, for both, that applies to both intersex and transgender people. Jesse Gender likes to lie about Star Trek and the Orville and, claim it doesn't handle this stuff as well as it should. But I think she's approaching it from a point of bias where she's, she very much despises Star Trek, has, made hours-long videos to, trying to trash talk Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry, and, completely misses a mark on her analysis. So I will link to those videos in the description here, so you can watch them in full, although if you don't like long videos, a 5.5 hour long video that she did proving that she's never actually seen an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, it's bad, but I'll link to it anyway so you can make your own judgment. I don't believe in not giving you the ability to look at the other side and make your own judgments, but I will be making a video or a series of short response videos to that mess of dishonesty, because I feel that it's worth responding to. No offense to Jesse Gender, I'm fully supportive of her rights as a trans person and everything, and I actually do like her videos for the most part, but she's got to lie about Star Trek, and I just do not abide people lying about Star Trek. But getting to episode 5, A Tale of Two Topas, Kelly is offering to mentor Topa, kind of helping him to prepare for the Union Point entrance exam. He's feeling there's something wrong with him. He feels out of place, and senses on some level that he isn't as he should be. Kelly thinks Bortus and Clyden should tell Topa that he was born female, but Clyden, being Clyden, he's dead set against it, forbids Tona from continuing to train with Kelly. Topa, begins asking, members of the crew what it's like to be dead, which is basically, expressing suicidal thoughts, basically, which is really worrying. But Kelly and Bortus both, independently of each other, but they take it upon themselves to lead Topa to discover the truth about his birth and the circumstances surrounding it. So Topa wants to return to being a female. He's lived his entire short life so far, feeling that he isn't as he should be, and he wants to go back to being the way he was born, a girl. So Bortus, is supportive. He never really got over, that Clyden and Mocklin society at large forced their child to be converted into a male. So he's supportive of Topa's desire to be returned to her previously female state. Clyden threatens to leave Bortus, and this prompts Bortus to say, look, there's a point that we may not have considered, which is the political divide that it might cause between Mocklus and the Union. The Union still needs Mocklin tech to fight the Krill and also the Kalon. So the Admiralty, says, okay, look, as much as we hate to do it, but, surgery, not happening. Mocklus would leave the Union over this happening. So this would leave them vulnerable to the Kalon and the Krill. And Claire volunteers to resign her commission in order to perform the procedure, because Union doctors are forbidden from performing the surgery. But, Isaac, technically not officially being a Union officer, he was technically a liaison, but he was never formally made into a Union officer, so he volunteers to perform the procedure. Now, Ed says, basically he uses kind of cover your ass language to say, look, if you do this surgery, it's going to be without our knowledge and sanction. So, just understand, don't get caught. But Ed does arrange a concert in the shuttle bay for the crew, so that Isaac can perform the procedure in peace. And Bortus actually gets to sing. We get to hear Peter Macon, use his singing voice finally after 3 seasons. And he's actually got a pretty decent singing voice. Scott Grimes is still the better singer on the cast, no doubt about it. But Peter Macon's not half bad himself. So, but he gives us a rather touching song. Clyden does step in and try to stop the surgery, but Isaac easily shrugs him off. Topa's restored to her female form. Clyden renounces his ties with Bortus and Topa, but Bortus says, listen to me, you are perfect, all right, just the way you are. But there's a lot to unpack with this episode, because when Bortus is talking about Topa's situation with Clyden, Clyden starts dropping little hints, and this is where I really like the way the writers portray this situation, because they don't give you an easy way to condemn Clyden, which it would on the surface be very easy to condemn him, because he is bigoted, he is closed-minded, but we start to get a little bit of insight into the things that make him tick, and begin to see things from his point of view, because when Bortus points out that Topa's unhappy, Clyden says all children are unhappy. Not some, or not saying all children are unhappy sometimes. He says all children are unhappy. Really, Clyden? All children? Or maybe it was just you who were unhappy as a child. And he kind of says, he kind of reveals that, when he found out that he had been born female, he implies that he hated himself, all right? When you find out that your entire life has been a lie, you can either accept it and move on and try to deal with that, or you can double down on the lie. And Clyden chose to double down on the cultural and clearly parental indoctrination to hate females with a passion. And so he clearly hates himself. yeah, Clyden hates himself and for being born female, for not being who he thought he was, for yeah, and he kind of turns his hatred of females inward at himself, but he's also uh, desperate to really kind of prevent Topa from enduring the self-hatred that he has had to endure since he found out about himself. So, so we are encouraged to condemn Clyden for his hatred and bigotry, but we at least understand why he is the way he is, and how a lifetime of societal conditioning and you know obviously family instilled prejudices can affect someone. So who doesn't have a bigoted relative or friend or coworker whom you can't stand to be around, but you kind of have to be with that person. Maybe you have to see this person at family gatherings or office meetings or whatever. But it's just a very touching story that ultimately this is about Topa, and Topa. This is clearly an allegory for both intersex and transgender people. Intersex because, well, obviously transgender people aren't forced to undergo gender assignment surgery at birth, because that's something that develops later as they develop their sense of identity and who they are, because their brains when they develop in the womb, you can be born a male with a female wired brain, or a woman with a male wired brain, because guess what, human biology not quite as simple and black and white as we've been led to believe. So and sometimes there are people who are born intersex, meaning they've got both male and female sex organs. And it used to be the trend that parents would, many parents, I'm not all parents obviously, but many parents would decide, when the kid is still too young to understand what's going on, they decide, okay, well, we'll just have sex assignment surgery, have the, one set of organs removed, and we'll raise our kid to be either a boy or a girl instead of both or neither. So but over the years we've come to realize how harmful that can be, and to realize maybe it's best for our kids that we just let them choose who they want to be when they get older. And in terms of transgender children, who realize that they have been born in the wrong body, it's very tempting to want to try and protect them by saying, oh no, you're too young to make this decision, and or it's abuse if you're allowed to undergo transition before you're even adult. But there really is no age in this society at which transgender people will ever be allowed to transition, because nobody in power, and certainly if you've been paying attention to the news, really wants transgender people to even exist. So it's a very hot and button political issue that the Orville handles, I think, quite brilliantly, and succeeds very well in giving us a sense of what's at stake here for people. I mean, it does get preachy, but it doesn't talk down to us the way you would on STD or Star Black Pickard or Lower Decks or Prodigy. I mean, you're just not going to see that on modern TV shows, because there's this trend to use identity politics as a club to talk down to people or to preach to the choir. And it doesn't work. It doesn't land very well, because you don't have actual characters. You've got concepts masquerading as characters. They're not fully developed personalities. But with the Orville, the writing is such that you empathize with people. You sympathize with them. You want them to succeed in spite of everything stacked against them. And when you invest emotionally in a character that is, fully fleshed out and played by an incredibly talented young actress, it just tugs at the heartstrings. So that's a very excellent episode. So then we get to another tearjerker following up right after A Tale of Two Topas, in which Lamar makes upgrades to the Aronoff device, makes it possible to send an entire ship back in time, and the Union orders the device to be transferred to a secure research facility, but when the Orville and its escort convoy get there, they find that it's been destroyed. They were attacked by the Kalon. Gordon attempts to destroy the device to keep it from falling into Kalon hands, but the core overloads, sends out an energy burst that hits the device, accidentally transports Gordon back in time to 2015. So the others, try to follow him, but they arrive 10 years too late, arriving in the year 2025, which is, just 3 years ahead of where we are now. Gordon has made a family with Laura, the musician chick he fell in love with last season, and had a relationship with her holographic recreation, but he spent 3 years in the woods trying to avoid human civilization before, just to preserve his own sanity, he had to go and be near people, but so he tracks down Laura, has a relationship with her, marries her, they've got a kid together, she's pregnant with kid number 2, so he wants to remain in the past, and Union law can go fuck itself as far as he's concerned, because, he waited 10 years for rescue and nobody showed up, and, it's not his fault, it's not their fault, they were late, time travel, tricky business, unpredictable, so, meanwhile, Isaac and Charlie are sent to find replacement dysonium for the core, because its dysonium supply has been diminished so that they can't get back. So Isaac and Charlie find a spot underneath this one house that's up for sale. Isaac's got a holographic disguise on. He actually is trying to chat up Charlie, make small talk with her, and we find out, he wants to thank her for saving his life, even though, she hates his guts and technically didn't have to, but, she did it anyway. So he thanks her for saving his life. She bitches him out, saying she didn't do it because she wanted to, because she was ordered to. She reveals that she was in love with Amanda, and she never got to the chance to tell her that she loved her. And, her death robbed her of being able to share her life with her. So, and she, of course, blames Isaac for that. And, that kind of puts things in context, as to why Charlie hates Isaac so much, because, and it also, explains it a little bit more why Amanda sacrificed herself to save Charlie, because, you don't, voluntarily end your own life, for someone who's just a colleague. No, you're going to do that for someone you love, I think. So, but Isaac says, nonetheless, I thank you, because he is grateful in his own way. So, but the real tearjerker here was when Ed and Kelly and Tala show up at Gordon's doorstep. One last try to convince Gordon to return, but he refuses. He pulls his gun on them and threatens to stun them. And by the time they come to, they'll be someplace they can't find them. But Ed decides they're going to use a Aronoff device to go back to 2015 and pick Gordon up before he gets to live his life. Gordon is basically, in a position where he has to either shoot his friend or let his family be erased from existence. And ultimately he can't bring himself to shoot his friends. So that timeline is erased, basically. The strain of the trip burns out the Aronoff device, so it's completely useless, but Lamar points out, hey, we've got the ability to return home. All we have to do is turn off the time dilation device that prevents them from. Because basically, whenever you go close to the speed of light, time slows down. So the Orville goes like 2 minutes at quantum drive, but without the time dilation protocols in place. So that sends them 200 years into the future, and then they make the trip back to Earth, and that's another 200 years. So they basically arrive back in their own time. But Ed and Kelly choose to tell Gordon, and he kind of sympathizes with him and says, look, you did the right thing, all right, because that Gordon, is not someone I would have recognized, for being so selfish. So I mean, it's emotionally, it's an incredibly impactful story that I think just really just kind of punches you in the gut and the face at the same time, and just the drama is just so good with that one. So episode 7, from Unknown Graves, we see flashback. Yeah, I can't talk right now. We see flashbacks to the Kalon's biological creators, who, and this is a complaint that I have, they made the biological Kalons gray-skinned or silver-skinned with red eyes and bald heads. And I'm thinking, you don't have to make the Kalon look like their creators, or vice versa. You could have gotten a little bit creative with that. I understand why they did it, probably because of budget reasons or whatever. Or maybe the Kalon biologicals, made their robots, in their own image, which, fits with the God themes that we've seen this season. But anyway, we get flashbacks to, the origins of the Kalon robots and how they were treated. And at the same time, in the present, the crew is trying to convince a species called the Genesi, which is a matriarchal society that dominates its males, that they're trying to get them to join the Union by having Kelly and Tala pose as captain and first officer, basically swapping, to try and trick them into thinking that, no, it's not a society of equals, because, they're very much like the Moclans. In fact, they're, more than one reference is, it's the Moclans all over again. But they've got tech that the Union needs. So, but meanwhile, the crew finds a signal coming from this supposedly abandoned planet, and they find a cyberneticist named Dr. Vilka and a peaceful Kalon who's named Timus, who apparently repaired and rewired Timus to give him the. They found him, the ship had crashed. He was the only Kalon left functioning. So they repaired him, but they also reprogrammed him to give him the full suite of human emotions. And, so he feels empathy and realizes, look, what we did was wrong. We should not have judged all biologicals, by, how we judged our creators. Because, I've seen in the year or more that I've been among biologicals that you're not evil. So but here's the thing though, Timus says to Isaac, when they have a conversation about the regret over their actions, but Isaac is not capable of feeling regret. He, at least not in any way that Timus is able to, but Timus says, look, Dr. Vilka gave me the ability to experience emotion. She can do the same for you. So Claire convinces Isaac to undergo the procedure, and it works briefly. There's this very touching scene where, Mark Jackson, who plays Isaac, is able to step out of the robot suit on the simulator and, declare his love for Claire in this really touching emotional scene. But then, but the emotions don't last. He reverts to his original state because, as it turns out, Isaac is a later generation of Kalon, and the Kalon only were able to develop the capacity for emotion because of the pain receptors that their builders installed into them. And the first feeling they ever had was pain, sheer agony from being tortured by the creators. And Timus kind of explains this to Charlie and kind of forces her to confront her own hatred for the Kalon over what they did. And she kind of has to see things from the Kalon's perspective, and realize that, just as Timus came to understand that he can't judge all biologicals by what their builders did, Charlie can't judge all Kalon by what they've done, because there are Kalon who are at least capable, if not willing, necessarily to feel empathy and be good beings. So, and of course, the ruse against the Genesi fails ultimately. But they managed to salvage the situation when Ed and Kelly kind of reveal that they were married and divorced, and Ed says that look, I respect Kelly, she's my first officer, even though our marriage ended, and I trust her with my life. That kind of gets the Genesi leader to say, okay, well, you're all right. So you're not as bad as we thought you were. So all right, I'll tell you what. If you want to send someone to, a diplomat, we'll expect her. We'll receive her, and there's at least a possibility. So. And there's this really funny side story where Lamar and Tala are having sex, and they're keeping it on the down low, and Lamar is like going to sickbay constantly with all these traumatic injuries, broken bones, ruptured organs and stuff, because Tala, being a Chilean, stronger than Lamar is, and they try to make it work, but his repeated and worsening injuries, they can't continue. And there's this really funny scene where Tala tearfully expresses her love for Lamar, and for Lamar it's really just about the sex, but Tala obviously felt something more emotional, and Lamar didn't want to give that up either, but it's like, yeah, maybe I better quit while I'm still alive. So it's so yeah, I mean, as filler episodes go, it's actually pretty cool, and it actually causes Charlie to kind of reevaluate how she views a Kalon, and this kind of brings me to my complaint with regards to the number of episodes in this season. And actually it's more a general complaint, because a lot of streaming shows will last maybe 10, 13 episodes and that's it. And I think it's a mistake in a way, because while it does allow a lot of shows to devote more of their budgets to making the episodes all that they can be, at least in theory, you still need good writing and good direction and good acting, but the downside is that you don't get as much time to emotionally invest in a character and really kind of get to know that character as you would in a more traditional season length of like maybe 20 or 24 episodes. So I think we could have benefited from getting to know Charlie a little bit more, because as we'll see later on the season, she exits the show in a spectacular fashion, but I just feel like I would have benefited myself personally from a little bit more time to get to know her and invest in more emotionally in that character. So, but at least we did get what we did here with the 2 episodes that she got so far. So moving on to episode 8, Midnight Blue, which is our second Topa-centric episode of the season. Topa and Kelly and Bortus all go on this inspection of the female Moclan colony. Havina returns. She tells Topa that she's secretly resumed smuggling female children from Moklas, which is in violation of the agreement. And of course, if that's discovered, the Moclans will be at liberty to go in and take the colony out and arrest everyone on it. But she's trying to recruit Topa to be a relay, entrusting her the name of the contact on Moklas who's helping them smuggle girls out, because obviously Moclan society is not entirely homogenous in its hatred of females. There's clearly a significant minority who just does not agree with the hatred of females, doesn't want them to undergo forced conversion into males, and is perfectly willing to smuggle their daughters out so they can live their lives as they are. So there is a contact, and Havina trusts Topa with the name of the contact and the means to communicate. But somehow the Moclan inspection team gets wind of this, and they don't know who the contact is. Only Topa knows, and Havina. But they kidnap Topa, take her off planet, and once the kidnapping is discovered, Havina is brought aboard. She tells Ed everything, and Ed kind of chews her out, rightly so. And if you notice by the opening audio clip, I just love the righteous indignation that Ed expresses, because he's right. Havina did take advantage of Topa's hero worship to really kind of use her for her own purposes, and Ed's calling bullshit on it. He does still have a lot of love and respect for Havina, but he's not going to put up with her bullshit. and that I thought was just a very powerful scene. So when they tell the Admiralty about this, I said, look, you're going to have to tell the Union Council that you've been violating the agreement, because the only way to get Topa back at this point is to, try and negotiate some kind of release. And Havina obviously doesn't want to sacrifice the safety of the colony. She refuses initially, but Ed creates a simulation of Dolly Parton, who plays herself in a guest starring role, and she manages to convince Havina to do what's right and go and testify before the Union. So Kelly and Bortus, who were not able to return to the ship, the shuttle was sabotaged, but they instead of rendezvousing with the Orville, they just went directly to follow the trail of the Moclan ship to wherever it went, and it turns out it's to the secret Moclan outpost, where Topa's been taken. She's been tortured rather brutally to try and get the information out of her, and when Bortus and Kelly finally rescue her and get to the room, Bortus brutally, he just goes full savage on Topa's torturer. Now, he's already missing an eye. Bortus, spoilers, he makes sure that he loses the other one using the krill equivalent of a Klingon pain stick turned up to max. So, but while Havina's given her testimony, and the Moclan delegate demands that she be turned over for prosecution and denies all the accusations, but then Bortus and Kelly arrive with Topa, who's refused treatment, so that she can show the council what's been done to her. And Bortus demands justice, and after deliberating, rather briefly, because there's really not much they need to deliberate on, the Union decides, you know what? No amount of Moclan tech is worth putting up with your bullshit. We're expelling Moclus from the Union. We'll face the Kalon and the Crow without you. So, and this, is going to have repercussions that impact later on in the season, and in fact, right in the very next episode. But it's so touching because Clyden, Captain Mercer, sends a message to Clyden telling him, what's happened to Topa. He rushes back to the Orville and, has a rather tearful reunion. He apologizes to her, accepts her as his daughter. He realizes he has to change. And, it's such a touching and emotionally powerful scene. To be fair, it does seem a little rushed. I think, I would have benefited from an episode, where Clyden, is kind of forced to confront his prejudices, and then he, maybe at the end he gets that message from Captain Mercer. But, it's still, it is, and again, this is why I think, the shortened seasons dedicated to streaming formats really kind of hurt because, I think we could have used a little bit more development of this situation. It's still powerful, but I think it could have been rendered more powerful by seeing a little bit more of a build-up to this. So that is my one complaint. But, still, Midnight Blue really had an impact, and that's why I call this video Year of the Topa, because, Topa gets two, very heavy episodes, and they just are excellent. And I think it was a very Topa-centric season for that reason. And Amani Polam, who plays the now young teen Topa, really nailed it. I mean, she's just an incredible actress, and she excels at playing a Moclan girl, who's she's very human in terms of her emotions and the way she presents herself, but she is still an alien, so she does, she is a Moclan too, so Moclans are going to be Moclans. So episode 9, Domino, wow, this is where everything kind of pays off, because after the Moclans are kicked out of the Planetary Union, they go directly to the Krill, and Talea kind of reads the Moclan delegation the Riot Act, because they go saying, now that the Union, they're kind of like self-righteous assholes who don't take our bullshit, and we don't like that, so we're going to come to you and offer you an arrangement, an alliance. We'll provide you with weapons and tech, and in return you let us dominate you, because obviously you're led by a woman, and we can't have that. But Talea's not having their bullshit either. She says, look, if we're going to form an alliance, it'll be an alliance of equals. But as the episode progresses, it's clear that Talea and the Krill are the ones really calling the shots here. The Union, specifically Isaac and Charlie, have created a device that is capable of destroying the Kalon by sending out this burst that uses their subspace communication system to overload and destroy them. And so the Union is able to use its weapon as leverage to kind of get the Kalon to stand down and end their hostilities. And they store the device on Earth for safekeeping as insurance against any future Kalon actions. But Admiral Perry, played by Ted Danson, feeling that the Kalon will eventually devise a countermeasure, he betrays the Union. He arranges to have the weapon stolen, takes it to a Krill ship, and gives it to the Krill and Kalon, who thank him by blowing up his shuttle as he leaves to go turn himself in. So Talia, is showing she's not playing games. So the Krillin-Mochlin alliance eliminates Perry to keep him from revealing the alliance too early. Although they figure it out anyway, pretty soon. But they take it to this brilliant Mochlin scientist, Dr. Kalba, who manages to build, because the device is powered by a quantum core, and the bigger the core, the more range the weapon has. So Kalba, makes this rather planetary-sized, well, not planetary-sized, it's oversized, but it's big enough it could, detonate a planet, basically. So he develops this in order to power the core to wipe out all the Kaylon. And so the Union basically says, okay, you know what? We've got to tell the Kaylon and work with them to get the device back, because the Krill and the Mochlins together are too big of a threat, and the Union can't possibly beat the two of them together, so they enlist the Kaylon to help. Now, Kaylon Primary is not having this very well, because he wants to go with them on the ground mission to recover the device and make sure that it's either recovered or destroyed. And Charlie ultimately has to sacrifice herself by overloading the quantum core, which it turns out it's the only way to stop it from detonating the Kaylon. So she sacrifices herself, and it's Talia is captured. She and Kelly get into a bitch fight where Kelly kind of kicks her ass with some help from Tala. But Talia is captured and taken back to Earth to stand trial for war crimes. Ed's like, you know what, I'm kind of done with you at this point because you tried to commit genocide. Talia says, if you let me go, I'll give you Anea since you brought her up. And Ed's like, you are a piece of work. You're trying to use your own kid as leverage. And so, he's pretty much done with her. He's seen that Talia is just too far gone in her hatred, and so he's washed his hands of her, basically. And so the Kaylon are offered an alliance with the Union with the eventual possibility of Union membership, and the Kaylon agreed to it. Now, Kaylon Primary, because Charlie has sacrificed herself, showing that biologicals, in spite of their resentment towards the Kaylon for what they've done, are still willing to save them and sacrifice themselves to save the Kaylon. So Primary is forced to realize that, maybe they did make a mistake. Well, not maybe, they did make a mistake in judging all biologicals. So, it kind of forces them to have a change of heart. And, Isaac says, look, they're worthy of preservation. They're my friends. And he's the one who delivers a eulogy for Charlie. And it's actually rather emotionally touching. I actually found myself tearing up during that because it was just so emotionally powerful. I just think, like I said, that it would have been even more emotionally powerful if they'd given more episodes to allow Charlie to breathe. We've seen episodes this season where they go like anywhere from an hour and a half to almost 2 hours, and it's like that's great, that you're able to tell these stories the way you want them to, Seth MacFarlane, but the downside is that you're making those episodes so long that the secondary plots and stories tend to suffer because you're focused so much on the primary story. And I think getting to know Charlie's and Clyden's journey from getting from point A to point B and letting go of their hatred, I think we could have benefited a bit more from having more time to explore that. So that is my one big complaint about this season and about those episodes. So the final episode of the season, Future Unknown, Bortus and Clyden renew their vows in a rather hilarious manner. The Orville is sent to check in on research on Sargas 4, which, if you remember that from Season 1, is from Majority Rule in Season 1, Episode 7. They get a message from Lysella, the cafe girl who helped save Lamar from getting lobotomized, basically. They pretty much have to bring her aboard because she's requesting asylum. Things have actually gotten worse on her planet since the Orville left, and she's lost several friends to the constant downvoting. She can't take it anymore. She has to get out. So she stole a communication device last time she was aboard the Orville and used it to contact them. So she's brought on board. They let her stay. Bortus and Clyden's reunion inspires Isaac to not only renew his commitment to Claire, but to actually propose marriage. So we get 2 weddings in one episode. Claire accepts his proposal after thinking it over and talking it over with her kids and with Kelly and Tala. And Kelly tries to help Lysella adjust to life on the Orville, but after witnessing all this technological advancements and she starts to have guilt at leaving her society behind and asks to return, but she doesn't want to return without some tech that she thinks will help save her society. But Kelly and Tala discover she is trying to get a comm scanner loaded with information on future tech, and they're trying to impress on her. Look, it's bad if you take technology back that your society hasn't developed on its own. This optimistic and hopeful future didn't come about because of technology. It came about as the technology came about as a result of people getting their acts together and learning to grow up as a society. So, Kelly shows Lysella a simulation of a world the Union attempted a couple centuries earlier to help in a similar fashion, but it wiped itself out just a few years later because they tried to use that technology to one-up each other, and so the Union basically passed its own version of the Prime Directive after that. So Lysella decides to stay after all. We get a hilarious appearance by the rest of the Kalan. 4,000 Kalan ships arrive because Isaac has invited all the Kalan to the wedding. And of course, so naturally Kalan Primary brings like the entire freaking fleet of 4,000 ships, leaving a light planetary defense for the homeworld, but they pretty much all arrive, but they can't obviously fit all the Kalan on board the Orville, so they allow just enough to make it work and broadcast it to the rest of the fleet. But it is really funny. It's like everybody send a message to Union Central so they don't scan the area and panic. But yeah, it's a funny episode all around. It's a perfect episode, I think, to kind of wind down, because after everything else was so heavy emotionally, we needed something lighthearted to sign off this season of the Orville, and hopefully not the whole series, because it seems like a lot of stuff has been wrapped up in this season, and I hope it's not wrapping up the show, because I think it's got at least a couple more seasons in it, maybe 3 or 4 more seasons, I hope, because the shortened number of episodes gives you more wiggle room. I typically don't watch a show much past season 5 under the original 22 or 24 episode a season format, because at that point, you've gotten enough stories where, how much farther can you take it before you start repeating yourself, and the quality of the writing starts to suffer. And I think we saw that with all the Star Trek shows, from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine and Voyager. By the time season 6 and 7 rolled around, it was kind of starting to go downhill and get a bit more contrived, because they're running out of ideas. So, but that's when you've got like 24 episodes a season, so you've got that much content. God, I hate that word. But you've got that much, that many chapters in the story to, get to that point. But with the Orville, because it is like 10 episodes a season, I think there's more room to kind of balance that out by having more seasons. But McFarlane actually did announce that the Orville will be appearing on Disney Plus. So I suspect, although I cannot prove without any official announcement, that the Orville might be moving to Disney Plus. Because after all, Disney purchased Fox, and Fox owned Hulu. So Disney owns Hulu and is now broadcasting on the Orville on Hulu, but now it's also coming to Disney Plus this month. So, yeah, so that's episode 10, and that's season 3 of the Orville. Now, there was a novella that was published called Sympathy for the Devil, because the COVID-19 pandemic shut down production and necessitated rearranging the shooting schedule. Sympathy for the Devil, which was planned on taking place somewhere between Midnight Blue and Domino, that they couldn't shoot the episode, so they made an audiobook narrated by Bruce Boxleitner, who plays a Union president under all that blue makeup. So Sympathy for the Devil, basically, that there's this baby who has basically spent his life in a simulator program of Nazi Germany, and so this kid Otto, grows up in a simulation of Nazi Germany, and the crew locates him and ends the program, and take Otto to be to the Orville and to his parents, who is apparently they were energy researchers working in an underground laboratory when the Krill attacked the lab to steal their research. And so Anna's mother hid him in the 1914 simulation before the Krill abducted and imprisoned them, and Adam was left to be raised in the simulator for nearly 30 years. So he's got difficulty adjusting. That they try to deprogram him, but he escapes, and that they eventually they have to they capture him and send him to a facility to get him the help he needs. And decades later, as an old man, he's working as a baker, and he runs into Ty Finn, an older Ty Finn, who mentions that Ty's mother helped him during a difficult time. So it does have a happy ending, but that is Sympathy for the Devil. And yes, I know I'm giving spoilers for people. It is a spoilery review, but I feel that if the Orville is renewed for a 4th season, Seth MacFarlane has said he does want to shoot this episode and give it the justice it deserves. So, I think Disney, Hulu, you need to get your act together and renew the Orville, okay? Don't let it go the way of the dodo. This is a great show. It is so emotionally powerful this season. It's like it's doing everything that Star Trek used to do, and showing us a better, more hopeful future than the one presently being presented by CBS with its bad reboot of a bad reboot of Star Trek. CBS seems to think that nihilism and cynicism and pessimism are better, and it's like, no. Reality or your interpretation of reality is not what Star Trek is. It's not what it was meant to be. And I think the Orville really is kind of filling that void for fans of true Star Trek, where we haven't had a Star Trek show since Voyager went off the air. I mean, Enterprise really wasn't Star Trek because the network went out of its way to avoid calling it Star Trek, and really only called it Star Trek halfway through season 3 because they were losing so many viewers due to lack of interest, and exclusively airing it on UPN, which was a much smaller market, that they needed to kind of get the fans back, so they had to change it to Star Trek Enterprise, which is really kind of a cheat, because you ended Voyager and then decided, because Voyager was on UPN and had to compete in a smaller market share and thus hit the ratings compared to Deep Space Nine, you're blaming everything but your decisions to limit it to UPN in a smaller market, and blaming it on franchise fatigue. So they went ahead and made a show that went out of its way to avoid being Star Trek and to go back to the time before Star Trek was Star Trek, which is stupid. So we really haven't had a proper Star Trek show since Voyager went off the air. And, then Jar Jar Abrams makes his bad reboot of Star Trek, and then Alex Klutzman, the thief who stole tardigrades and other ideas from people, goes ahead and makes a bad reboot of Jar Jar Abrams' bad reboot, and completely bastardizes Star Trek, shits all over Gene Roddenberry's vision. In fact, actually, I will be doing some episodes reporting on what William Shatner has recently had to say about the state of Star Trek today, rightly pointing out what Gene Roddenberry himself would have to say about it. So, lots to do in the next few weeks as I get ready for what I hope will be my last academic year for my master's program. I only need 3 more classes to pass, and I'm going to be bogging down and doing that, but I do want to make some episodes while I'm doing that. So let me know what you thought of this season and the episodes individually and the season overall. I mean, do you agree or disagree with what I've said? Why or why not? I want to hear from you. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive notifications whenever we upload new content. Like this video, share it. If you want to help support the channel, keep the lights on, help us bring you more content, head over to our Patreon or our Ko-fi page. We can't do this without you. Until next time, this is Michael Wilk for The Wilk Report saying take care. Good night. I'm out.